Hello and back. Welcome back again to Office Hours with me here in my office here at Berkeley. And we're going to be talking for the next half hour. It's not really an hour, it's a half hour. And I'm going to be talking with you about Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump and Hillary and the politics and some economic issues, and then answering your questions. And we'll try to keep this lively because these are really important issues. And if you could, do me a favor, if you could share right now with your friends, because this is live. This is actually happening right now, and you're there and I'm here, and if you want to share this with anybody, that would be great. And if you want to subscribe, I am told that there is a button. I do not see a button, but there's supposed to be a button up in that corner. You can actually subscribe so you can know when we are on. And we're going to we've been, this is about the third or fourth week we've done this, so by now it should be habit forming for you, right? All right, first thing on the agenda, I have got, this is kind of a personal thing. Last Friday, I felt that it was about time that I endorsed Bernie Sanders. The reason I hadn't endorsed Bernie up to that point is that I was chairman of Common Cause, which is an incredibly important organization, been trying to get big money out of politics for years, and it's nonpartisan, so I couldn't really endorse. But I felt that I had my conscience. I had to endorse Bernie Sanders, and therefore I took a leave of absence from Common Cause. And I'm very, very glad I did, so here he is, Bernie Sanders for 2016. I endorse Bernie Sanders for president in 2016. Can I have a little bit of applause, a little excitement? Thank you, thank you. But I didn't get a lot of, I got some positive responses, and I don't really care personally whether everybody likes it or not that I endorse, but this is typical. This is something from Lang Monteith. Lang, this is what you said, and your representative of some people, you say, quote, "If the math is against Bernie, why are you pushing for the loser? It sounds divisively irresponsible to me." And Lang, I'm sorry it sounds divisively irresponsible to you, but you are jumping to conclusions, Lang. You're assuming that Bernie is the loser. And there are three things I want to bring to your attention. You should not count Bernie out. Number one, a lot of the biggest primaries and caucuses are coming up, and many of them are heavily either tilting toward Bernie or are places where there are a lot of Bernie supporters. If you just look, Maine, Michigan, Ohio, you have New York and California, a lot of big states. Lang, you can't just count Bernie out from all of these primaries and caucuses. This is where most people live. The second thing is you've got to understand that there are a lot of small donors who continue to give. Bernie Sanders is now sitting on, in February, I think it was $42 million was raised from small donors by the Sanders campaign. And the small donors to Sanders' campaign are not discouraged. Even after South Carolina, a very, very big defeat for Bernie Sanders. Granted, Bernie Sanders Monday had the biggest single day, $6 million of small donors. These are small donors, $27 on average. The third thing, Lang, can you pay attention, please? The third thing, this is the most important, is that the Sanders campaign is not just about Bernie Sanders. In fact, Bernie would be the first to admit it's not just about Bernie. It's about a movement to take back our economy and to restore our democracy, to fight the moneyed interests, to get big money out of politics. And that movement is going to go on. It's going to go right on to the Democratic nomination, to the convention. It's going to go right on beyond the convention. In fact, it may go on. In fact, it should go on for years. Lang? So I am not backing a loser. I have very, very great respect for Hillary Clinton, and if she wins the nomination, I will certainly support her. But at this point, if you can't follow your conscience in a primary, Lang, when are you going to follow your conscience? You get it? This is sort of part of it. It's a lot of people say, well, Hillary will do better against Trump, assuming that Trump is going to be the Drumpf, as John Oliver calls him. Drumpf, Donald Drumpf. Did you see that, John Oliver? It was great. And I'm going to call him Drumpf from now on, and I think we all should. So you have Donald Trump on one side, and you've got Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton on the other. The question is, what kind of campaign is it likely to be? Now, if it's a traditional right versus left campaign, where the Republican is on the right and the Democrat is on the left, Hillary Clinton is likely to move to the middle. That's what Clintons do. That's what Bill Clinton did after he got the drubbing in 1995. He triangulated, he went to the middle. But I don't think the campaign is going to be a traditional left-right campaign. By the way, The Weed, that great podcast, made this point. I think that it's really going to be not so much left versus right. It's going to be about bigotry. Now, I don't think either Bernie or Hillary will stoop to that kind of, Drumpf bigotry. Of course they won't. But the biggest issue is going to be establishment versus anti-establishment. The Drumpf is going to run as an anti-establishment candidate. Now, you and I know he's a big real estate developer. He's a billionaire. He is the establishment, but he is posing as an anti-establishment candidate. And the biggest issue in this campaign is establishment versus anti-establishment. Now, who among Bernie or Hillary is the anti-establishment candidate to respond to the Drumpf? Well, it should answer itself. So I think that actually, Bernie, because he is the anti-establishment candidate among Democrats and among independents, would have a much better chance in a establishment versus anti-establishment campaign than Hillary would have. Which gets me to the real. Here's what happened. Super Tuesday not only exploded the Republican Party. I mean, the Republican Party is dead. It's gone. Good riddance. R.I.P. Rest in peace. But you've got 4 different tribes right now. Now look at my graphic. Do you like my graphics? I try. I mean, I'm a great believer in graphics. You've got the Drumpf authoritarian tribe. And it's not conservative, it's authoritarian. That means they believe in a strong leader who is so strong, you don't even have to answer. He doesn't even have to come up with policies. It's all just on the basis of his personal strength and on the basis of his confidence. And, he says, I'll protect you. I am confident. I am strong. Everybody else is weak. That's the Drumpf authoritarian party. Then you have Bernie Sanders' political revolutionary party. And then you have Hillary Clinton's Democratic Establishment Party or tribe. And then you have Ted Cruz's right-wingers. Now, these are essentially the 4 tribes right now in American politics. If we were in a parliamentary system, basically there'd be 4 parties, and the 4 parties would each of them would try to gather as much of the other party as possible to form a government, and they would elect a prime minister. We don't have a parliamentary system, so what do we do about these 4 tribes? Well, one is going to win the presidency, obviously. The other thing that is important here is that I left out a very big group. It's called the Republican establishment. And the interesting question is the Republican establishment doesn't right now have a tribe. They don't have a candidate. Each of these tribes has a candidate. The Republican establishment doesn't have a candidate. So watch and listen to where the Republican establishment is going to go. I don't think they're certainly they hate the Drumpf. Will they go with Bernie Sanders? I'm not sure. They are establishment. Bernie is anti-establishment. I don't think so. Will they go with Cruz? No, they hate Cruz. Cruz is the most people. I can't describe you. I've been around American politics for 35 or 40 years. I have never ever come across a politician in the Senate or in Congress who is as hated by his colleagues as Ted Cruz. So by a process of elimination, I think the Republican establishment goes to Hillary Clinton. Now just watch that dynamic, and it's an important dynamic because it raises what happened this morning, a couple of hours ago. Do you remember this guy? Those of you, you may be too old to remember Mitt Romney. I know, even when he was running, most of us didn't remember him. But this morning, here's what Mitt Romney, now Mitt Romney is the Republican establishment. I mean, he embodies, represents, he is the epitome of the Republican establishment. And Mitt Romney, a couple of hours ago, gave a speech. And the speech was calculated. The speech was actually hosted by the Republican establishment. They put Mitt Romney up to it. It was not Mitt Romney's idea. I know that the Republican establishment said, Mitt Romney, you are going to have to give a speech. You ran for president in 2012, and this is your time to give a speech denouncing the Trump. And here's what Mitt Romney said about the Trump. He said, Donald Trump is a phony and a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University. Oh, pretty cutting. He's playing the American public for suckers. Dishonesty is Trump's hallmark. His bullying, the greed, the showing off, the misogyny, the absurd third-grade theatrics. Now, you know, from Mitt Romney, this is really brutal. But here's the problem. Mitt Romney, 4 years ago, was endorsed by the Trump. And when the Trump endorsed Mitt Romney was so pleased. He said, I'm delighted to have this endorsement. And there are pictures of them hugging and holding hands and putting their arms around each other. And the other thing is, Mitt Romney is the least persuasive person in America right now to most Americans. Not only was he trounced in 2012, but he represents the worst of the Republican establishment, the elitism, the wealth, the disdain for, remember the bottom 47%? Mitt Romney is not somebody, if you have half a brain and you want to really denounce the Trump, why would you ever choose Romney as your outpiece, your mouthpiece? I mean, it makes no sense. It's just another example of the complete lack of judgment and blindness of the Republican establishment. They don't get it. They don't understand what's happening. They haven't for years, and now they're paying the price. Several of you have asked me about a number, over the past week, a number of economists, very esteemed economists, including some of my colleagues, have attacked Bernie's economics, Bernienomics. Do the numbers add up? I just want to spend 1 minute on this, but I want to go through this because it's important for you to know the truth. According to Bernie's estimates of what he and his economic plan would do, he will get unemployment down to 3.8%, and he will get economic growth up to 5.6%. Now, a lot of economists say you can't do that. Well, of course you can. I mean, back in the early 80s, we had economic growth of about, almost 5.6%. And in the late 1990s, we had unemployment down to just about 3.8%. So it's within the realm of possibility. But these economists, and some of them are dear friends of mine, and they are very esteemed, they say, nevertheless, it's still unrealistic, because there's nothing about Bernie's plan that is going to get these kinds of numbers. But what they're not looking at is the effect of single payer. Now, there are a lot of other things that Bernie has proposed, but single payer is a huge, important deal. Right now, America is paying almost 18% of our entire economy for health care. This is the most that any advanced country is paying as a proportion of their economy, and we're getting less for it because our system is based on for-profit, private health insurance. And so what we're paying for is not only high executive salaries and payoffs to investors, we're also paying for advertising and marketing, and we're paying huge administrative costs. And if you add in pharmaceutical prices, we're paying all of the same things, advertising and marketing and high executive salaries and everything else for pharmaceuticals. A single payer plan. Did I say that right? Single payer plan. I'll do it again. Single payer plan. A single payer plan would be so much more efficient. I mean, most other advanced countries have this, and they're paying almost half of what we are paying on a per person basis, and they are actually providing health care to everyone. Canadians, if you are Canadian, you probably think we're nuts down here. Well, for a lot of reasons, but particularly with regard to health care. I have Canadian friends who say, you mean to tell me you can't just have a doctor? You can't just go in and have your health care and health needs treated? This makes a huge deal. This means we're freeing up resources in this country if we have a single payer plan. We're also generating huge productivity increases. Of course we can get down to 3.8% unemployment and 5.6% growth. All right, the worst of the week. This is a feature. It's hard this week, but my choice is Monsanto. Now, in the spirit of giving you news that you don't normally get, and you won't get from a lot of the major media, let me just tell you what happened. There is a rewrite of the Toxic Substances Control Act. This is a very important act. It has to do with all of the toxic chemicals that go through into every product, into all sorts of systems. It's a rewrite that's going on right now in Congress. And it turns out that in the small print of the House version of this bill, Monsanto gets protection from liability for the PCBs. These were the chemicals that Monsanto put out there for years that were toxic, that caused all kinds of harms to individuals. Cities are now trying to clean this up. Cities are trying to sue Monsanto. Individuals with all sorts of toxic problems are trying to sue Monsanto, but this bill will prevent them from ever suing Monsanto. It is in the House bill. Now let me just say, I don't want to get too ranting about this, but I am outraged about this for a very simple reason. Monsanto got this in there because Monsanto is a major contributor. It has huge numbers of lobbyists. It is the biggest agribusiness lobbyist in Washington right now. It has hired all sorts of previous former Congress people and former senators. Even Clarence Thomas was once an attorney for Monsanto. It has power. This election, Bernie Sanders and everything we're talking about is about the connection between wealth and power. That's what's going on right now. When you have huge wealth at the top, corporations that have a great deal of concentrated wealth, and individuals, billionaires with huge wealth, they have political power. They can use that wealth to get what they want in terms of American politics. And that ability makes them even wealthier. It entrenches their power and it entrenches their wealth. It's a vicious cycle. If we don't break into that cycle, we're going to have more and more Monsantos. We're going to have more and more corporate welfare. We're going to have more and more bank bailouts. We're going to have more and more of everything we have seen. And what that means is that you and I and the American middle class and the poor, we are burdened more and more. We pay more, and there are more burdens in terms of toxic chemicals or anything else you want to talk about. All right, I've got it off my chest, but it's not off my chest. This is what this election is about. All right, your questions, please. This comes from Brian Hughes. Why do we still have caucuses? Brian, we have caucuses. A lot of this is historical. Certain states have caucuses, and they feel, with some justification, that they are, their politics is local, and they like, it's neighbors, and people get together in big gyms. And have you been to a caucus? I've been to a caucus. It can be a lot of fun. And you see neighbors, and they say, why are you voting the way you are? And I'm voting for this person. And you have fights. It's really grassroots politics. Okay. Ashley Duggins, what are the chances of super-delegates switching sides? They can switch sides. They are not pledged. If they see that the public is very strongly in favor, for example, of Bernie Sanders, those delegates could conceivably switch. What do you think will happen if they don't in terms of an uprising? Ashley, using terms like uprising. Well, I'll tell you something as a practical matter. If You've got Hillary has a huge number of superdelegates because they are Democratic insiders. They're congresspeople and senators, and they are governors and state officials, and most of them are with Hillary because Hillary is the establishment Democratic candidate. But if Bernie starts surging and starts getting more pledged delegates, or even gets a lot of pledged delegates, if it starts being very close, then the superdelegates are going to have to start supporting Bernie. And it's not going to be an uprising. You know, I was there in 1968. Now, some of you may remember this, a dwindling number of you. But in 1968, the Democratic Party, this is when all of this began for both Republicans and Democrats. 1968, we did have some primaries and some caucuses. Eugene McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy fought it out, and Bobby Kennedy, as you remember, was tragically killed, gunned down the night of the California primary. But what happened at the nominating convention, that Democratic convention, the Democrats, basically the establishment, said, forget Eugene McCarthy, forget the primaries, forget the caucuses, we are going to put up Hubert Humphrey. And there was an uprising. And the Democratic Party, it took years to put the Democratic Party back together. Okay, Aviv Dorin. If the Republicans had superdelegates, it would seem that the party establishment could stop Trump from becoming the nominee. Is this a compelling reason to have superdelegates? Well, you know, it's interesting. If the Republicans got rid of superdelegates, and they got rid of superdelegates primarily because they wanted to show that they were even more democratic, small d, than the Democrats, and that they didn't fear the public. Well, you're absolutely right, Aviv. If they had superdelegates, the Republican establishment would not allow Trump to get as far as he has got. I don't think that that's necessarily a reason to uphold superdelegates in the Democratic Party or any place else. It is anti-democratic. All right. We have another question. Dr. Elizabeth, or D. Elizabeth Ament. How can we fix the voter suppression tactics of the Republican Party? Well, Elizabeth, there is only one way. We do have reason to believe that the Republican Party is already, even in the Democratic primaries and caucuses, it is using voter suppression tactics in terms of very much stricter ID laws, and also voting places to vote that are understaffed with regard to Democrats. They're going to do more of this. And I think the Justice Department has got to be absolutely vigilant. It's got to review what's happened in the primaries. It's got to make sure that there are enough voting places. Now, there's no way that the federal government can order states to have more absentee voting or more days, for example, of absentee voting. But certainly the kind of prejudicial effects that you get in voter suppression are illegal. They are just illegal. The Justice Department has to be on this case. David Weprin. David, did I pronounce your name correctly? Would you agree that the GOP isn't being destroyed, rather it's being transferred into the authoritarian party? What does this mean for the libertarian members of the GOP? Look, I think it's being destroyed. The party, yes, it has its authoritarian wing, it has its establishment wing, it has its libertarian wing, it has a lot of people who are just old-fashioned right-wing Republicans, it has its Tea Partiers. They can't get together. They don't have a structure. The Republican Party, you remember that old, what was that old skit about the rabbit? It's a dead parrot. The dead parrot skit. You remember that Monty Python, the dead parrot skit? You know, it sells a dead parrot, and the person who got the dead parrot says, "This is a dead parrot," and the salesman says, "It's not dead. It's just sleep. It's asleep." And the guy says, "Well, no, this parrot is dead. He's dead. He's a dead parrot." And the person who's selling says, "No, you've got it wrong. He is just, he's frozen. He's a frozen parrot. He'll come alive." Well, you know something? The Republican Party is a dead parrot. All right, Carla Callan, how can we have a democracy when the public is so overwhelmingly uninformed and uneducated? Well, Carla, we can't have a democracy without an informed public, and that's one of the problems we have now. Fox News? Fox News. Can you imagine getting your news from Fox News? Fox News is a propaganda machine. You know that. The mainstream media, I think, are certainly better than Fox News, but the mainstream media have their own problems. And a lot of people are now getting their news from, places that are just, have no, they're not even fact-based. They're not even in the universe of fact-based discussion. And it's a problem. It's a problem I worry about a great deal. That's why we're doing videos and why I'm doing this and why our little Inequality Media Project is doing the kind of work we are trying to do. And our film, did you see it? Inequality for All? If you haven't seen it, please see it. That's why I don't want to be self-promoting, but it's why I write books. Okay, Judy Kahn. Robert, how can it be communicated to Democratic voters that Bernie is more electable than Hillary? Well, Judy, I believe that that's true, and I'm now communicating that. Carrie Bryans-Riggs. How do we motivate the millennials that show up in throngs to Bernie rallies to show up at the polls? Carrie, young people, and I know this because I was, believe it or not, a young person once. They have other things on their minds. Sometimes it's hard to get to the polls, and it's hard to schedule, and it's hard to, if they're at university or they're at college, it's hard to get to where they actually are registered. It's hard to coordinate absentee. But you're right, there's no excuse. There should be no excuse. Young people are part of the Bernie Sanders democracy movement. They're part of this political revolution. But you know something, young people, even if you're not, you have not only a social obligation, it goes beyond social obligation. It's part of participating in our democracy. And I want to say this again. I know many of you, because I teach a lot of you. Many of you are cynical about politics. You don't want to get close to it. But if you're cynical about politics and you don't vote and you don't get close to it, what happens? The moneyed interests win. They want you to be cynical. They want young people to give up on politics so they can get it all. That's their goal. Don't let them, please. We have time for a couple more, and in fact, just two more. Stephanie Kimball, do you think that there will be a third-party candidate created in response to Trump? Well, Stephanie, the only third-party candidate that has been even suggested by himself is Michael Bloomberg. And Bloomberg says he would get in if it is Trump versus Bernie Sanders. But I haven't heard much from Michael Bloomberg, and I think that Michael Bloomberg, if I were betting right now, I think it's too late for a third-party candidate. Now, there's some rumblings that the Republican establishment wants to put up their own third-party candidate, and maybe that's Bloomberg. That would be interesting. It would take votes away from the Drumpf, and that's a good thing. Okay, last question. Oh, actually, I want to read. Don't go away because I have to read a very important letter. Alex Krenzin, do you secretly want to be a comedian or cartoonist instead of an economist? You are very funny. Alex, how did you guess? I wanted to be a cartoonist. But nobody, when a kid, I sent the New Yorker my cartoons. I had a whole wall of my bedroom, an entire wall of rejections from the New Yorker. It was really quite dramatic. I'd come in, I'd invite my friends in. Can you imagine? This is like 300 rejections from the New Yorker magazine. And then in terms of stand-up, I'm not really funny. Well, I am funny. All right. We've got this. I want to read this to you. I just got this today. This is from an 11-year-old named Cosette. She's age 11, and she lives in Berlin. I think it's Berlin, Massachusetts. And here's what age 11 Cosette says: "Dear Professor Reich," and by the way, look at how beautiful her writing is. Can you get that? It's just lovely. She says, "Dear Professor Reich, My papa and I watch your show every week. My show. This is my show. I never had a show. Okay, my papa and I watch your show every week, and we were wondering if there's a form of capitalism that is good for the earth. That's a heavy question from an 11-year-old. And Cosette, the answer is yes, there could be a form of capitalism that's good for the earth. Capitalism is basically a system that is neither bad nor good, but you see, it can be good if capitalism generates enough productive capacity to have a cleaner environment, to have public health, to have good schools for the public, to do the things that a society should have. There is not any secret, Cosette, as to why rich societies, generally speaking, have cleaner environments than poor societies. Because rich societies have that capacity. It comes down to politics. Cosette, the question is a public decision as to whether you use, as a member of a society, you use your productive capacity in a capitalist society, in a democratic capitalist society, whether you use that productive capacity for good things, like controlling or reversing climate change and having investments in public health and investments in education and helping the poor and doing what a society must do, or it's just about personal acquisition, more and more stuff. And that's a decision, Cosette, that you and other 11-year-olds and other young people will have to be making over the next 50 or 60 or 70 years. And I want to thank, once again, Zoe Umlatt, Beck, and Yael Bridge for their extraordinary help, and we will see you next week.